every day off you have and every excuse you seem to come up with is going to degrade and is going to start chipping away at that behavior you worked so hard to build. And I can tell you this from experience, and I think most athletes will. It's the same, I think, with weight loss and weight gain, and all these difficult scenarios that we all go through in life, is that it took me a while to get super consistent and to kind of get that behavior in, and I'm sticking with it. But boy, is it easy to get off.
Good morning, buddy.
Hey, happy Thursday. It's May 7th, 2020, and I feel like we just did one of these.
We did. I literally feel like we just hung up. We were late, and now we're early.
I know, man. Well, I mean, technically you and I are early, but yeah, we'll be on time. It's the least we could do. Appreciate you tuning in. Welcome aboard. Crushing Iron Podcast 371.
It's 371 today.
And sometimes I wonder if I should even say that, but just say, hey, Crushing Iron Podcast, and just let the numbers take care of themselves. But, keeps me on track, keeps me present, also helps me appreciate how far we've come and what we've been able to accomplish, and yet how far we have to go.
I know. Almost at 500.
Yeah, that's right. That's the old triathlon math. We are halfway to 500. Pretty much says we are on our way to 1,000. We're just third of the way there. But hey, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you giving us your time and attention, which is valuable, especially right now. So appreciate that. If it's your first time tuning in, thank you. We cover all things triathlon and life. We cover race recaps, race previews. We occasionally have on race directors. We'll do a lot of intense kind of technical podcasts, really diving into the analytics behind training and the way you should train. And then we also, a lot of times, just kind of deviate towards the thing that happens 22 hours, the other 22 hours of the day outside of training, which is life, and how triathlon and our training, they can complement each other. They can oftentimes take away. And then Mike and I both, as coaches and athletes, just do our best to share our experiences, what we've been through for Mike the last 7 years, me the last 10 to 15, and hopefully share those in a non-judgmental, non-hack format that lets you just absorb what you need to absorb, hopefully apply it to your life in a positive way. And if we can, we've made plenty of mistakes in our day, both on and off the race course. So if we can make those for you and then give you the advice you need to hopefully avoid those, and then trudge through and make your own path in triathlon, then we will have considered this a success.
I like how you put that, man. We make mistakes for you. Well, we do. I think, a big part of the angle that we've always had is just sort of like letting it flow and letting it fly and seeing where it goes and talking about triathlon and everything that's sort of connected to it. And, and it's days like today when I hope we can solve some of our own problems.
do you have a problem that needs to be solved?
Usually, no. No, I don't. In fact,
I'll solve it. That's one of my favorite songs.
Oh, yeah.
If you have a problem, then I can try to solve it. But I do, before you obviously unload on some kind of therapeutic needs session, isn't it kind of nice though that can be not really a niche or an angle, as you said, but that we can readily admit that we definitely, and while we do give out a lot of information, and I specifically can go on rants and give a lot of advice, it's all relevant to you as you see fit. And there is not one way for everyone. There are definitely different outlines and probably guidelines that I think are best for everyone in terms of that will generally shape you in the best way you need to be shaped in terms of your triathlon journey, specific ways to train for swimming, cycling, and running. But everyone is different. Everyone's life is different. Some athletes have to find success training 8 hours a week because that's just the best they can do. Some athletes can train and need to train almost twice, if not more than that. So that's what we do. We share our experiences, and hopefully you can apply that. Take a little bit here, take a little bit here, and make it your own. We have done a lot of things in both of our triathlon hobbyist careers as both coaches and athletes, and we've seen a lot and we've been through a lot, and that's really why I think I love doing this podcast, is that we can share those under the guise of just this is us. This is what we've done. This is what we've been through. Hopefully, you can avoid some of the same pitfalls that we've gone through, and that we are both flawed, both as humans and triathletes. We don't pretend to be perfect or have all the answers, but that's what conversation's for. It's
Yeah.
not. And that's
Well,
why
that's
that's
the
why I
thing.
enjoy it.
Yeah, I
Go
was
for it.
just, no, man, like, I've been listening to podcasts myself for a long time about different, so I'm looking around and finding things, and there's always some that like I stumble on who I really start, man, they're really good. But the approach of like, there's a lot of, I don't know, the people kind of like have the answers kind of all the time, and that just sort of like, I like it maybe for a little bit, but then I always gravitate back towards podcasts that kind of have that conversation and sort of maybe organic flow where I find things that maybe aren't even necessarily meant to be found, if that makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
we, I think that's sort of how we do it a lot of times, is that we kind of just go back and forth and sort of find these things, and they're the old analogy or whatever, you pick what you want out of something. And to me, that's what I personally, I enjoy that more these days, because there is so much information out there. And it would be easy for us really to go pull some article off the internet and like talk about it verbatim, and you know what I mean, like, so I just, it's really interesting to see where we go sometimes into the mystery of it all, without having that kind of pressure on it. And I think sometimes that can be, um, there can be new answers or new discoveries there, and it's just interesting to me. And again, it's sort of like, if you want to do something in life, you go out and scratch your own itch, and I think that's what we do. And I think that we, you know, we want to keep it interesting to ourselves, and that's important. And I think that translates. I don't know. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, rather than
It's
trying to make it something it's not.
Well, it's nice to not have really an agenda, and so I think that's fun, and it allows us to go a lot of different directions and not feel like we have to be pulled into a specific box. So yeah, that's why I love it. That's why I enjoy doing these, and I think that's why for our listeners that have been with us for, quite a, quite a while, to the ones that are just now listening. It's we do we you and I both love triathlon. I've been doing it for such a long time. It's a huge part of my life. It's a substantial part of my life and my family's life, and I love
Mass?
it. Yeah, it is. It's massive, and it's had an incredible impact on myself as a person. And it's kind of one of those things that, like, if you do this sport for long enough, and I think it's like a friendship. It's like any other relationship that you have. And I look back, and, like, if I look at, like, there are very few things that are still with me from 7, 8 years ago, before I got sober, that my life was a certain way. And, like, there are certain things that have still carried on, that I've still found a way, that I've still gravitated towards, and triathlon has always been one of those. And I've got new friends, but obviously a core group that was with me before that. And so yeah, it's a wonderful sport. That's why I think you and I are both so passionate about it. It's not just because while we love to get wrapped up in what we can do performance wise within the sport of triathlon, and within competing against ourselves. I think it's very important to note that, and just to kind of always remind ourselves, is what it's doing for us and what it can do for us if we allow it to, and if we have a good perspective, and if we keep things objective, and if we just simply go out to do our best and improve, and understand that we are on a never ending journey. Never ending. But A, we don't know what's going to end. B, it could go on, hopefully, for years, in even decades. Like, it's weird to me to think sometimes that I've been in this sport, participating in it, coaching in it for over a decade. Like, 25% of my life. And it can be that way for all of us, but I think and while it might look different in different parts of our lives, whether you started out doing it when you're single in your 20s, 30s, and you get married and you have kids and you have a, really important job, and the shift is different. It can always be there. And that's why I think the way that we look at experience sports like triathlon, every sports is an experience, but the way that we get to participate in them, the way that the age grouper drives the train of what we're doing in these sports, that we can do them and people want to come and do them. like that's why I find so fascinating about triathlon and other endurance sports and road running and even some specific cycle events is we can be on course and do the exact same thing at the same time as the professional and the best athletes in the world at our specific sport. Like imagine like being able to, go to the, a park and play like in a 5-on-5 basketball game. You look over and there's like LeBron James and Kevin Durant, and you're all doing it at the same time. You're like, this isn't supposed to be happening. I'm supposed to be paying money to sit in the stands and watch. But we get this opportunity in the same races, the same environments, the same atmospheres as the professionals. They get paid, not nearly enough, but they get paid to do these things, and we get to be right there alongside of them. And not only do we get those opportunities in races, but we get an opportunity to have it be a integral and a core part of what we do and who we are. And I think that for the athletes that find that groove where, and I've had so many athletes recently just kind of come in like, you know what, I'm like super at peace with maybe I won't even race this year, and you know what, I'm okay with that. I just enjoy getting better. And I think that's a very specific piece of training and mindset that every athlete should have and needs to have, or either needs to work towards having, is just that commitment to, I know what I'm doing today is allowing me to get better. It might not look specifically a certain way that meets an expectation of that I would say is like materialistic and vain in a way that fulfills my ego. But what it is doing is providing me an opportunity to just be better, not just to get better, but to be better. And we have that opportunity every day that we wake up, every day we put on our run shoes, every day we hop on the trainer, every day we get in the pool, every day you go for a walk, whatever it is, you have an opportunity that no matter what you're doing, to go out and get better. It's going to feel different, it's going to look different. But if you're doing it and you're doing it the way it's supposed to be done, then you're not just going to physically see a benefit, but you're going to reap the mental and emotional benefits as well.
Mm.
I have no idea how I got there, but
I
here we
don't either, but I like,
but
again, I like
here we
it.
are, man. It's like we
Yeah.
put on the blindfolds, we hit the gas, and then next thing you know, we're halfway across Kentucky, and now, oh, here we are in Ohio.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny that because I had a loose topic, and but you just sort of shifted it because my thought was, okay, my first phrase that came to mind was we're kind of in a holding pattern with regard to races and everything, right? Like that. So for our pilot buddies, DJ and Jeff, and I'm sure we work with more than that, but I looked up holding pattern and what it is and all that sort of thing. And it's just sort of like waiting until they have things ready on the ground or whatever. And but what you just said is that we're kind of not in a holding pattern because we can still just keep getting better. And race or not, it doesn't really matter so much. It does, but obviously people want to race. And but you just shifted me on that because yeah, it's like, no, we're not really in a holding pattern because we can still keep getting better and being better. And I started, I'm always thinking about what that means to me. And for me, a lot of that is about just having more energy. That's just my personal piece on it sometimes is how does this sport translate into me having more consistent energy in life and, you know, I guess complementing the other parts of it. And for us, it's, doing the business and the podcast and the hub that we got coming together and just like being more energized for stuff like that. So I tend to make mistakes a lot because, I'll go out and feel that energy. And like one of my biggest things that mistakes that I think I make is that I have a lot of energy, so I'm going to keep using it instead of just saying, okay, no, that's the point is you have an hour ride today, not a 3 hour ride, and that's misusing the sport in a lot of ways, I think, because the sport should supplement and enhance your life outside of the rides and the runs and the swims in a way. Isn't that kind of the point, Is that sort of what you're saying
I
too?
mean, it is the point, but I mean, you said it, like, and I think that's where a lot of athletes find themselves in such a difficult situation is that they have accepted and kind of put on this holding pattern costume of like, well, we just don't know, so it allows every time I think you're poking holes in your own agenda and your own process, you allow excuses to creep in. You allow a shift in mindset that can become lazy. And I think the difficult part that we often find ourselves in, and I think a lot of triathletes are this way, whether they want to admit it or not, is that many athletes came to this sport while they are in a lot of ways type A. There are many triathletes that are not type A, but triathlon and the way that people train and the way that I think the kind of the stereotype fills it out and comes to fruition is that we came from a place, because we didn't start this, most of us didn't start this, a lot of us didn't start this sport because our life was totally perfect. Things were in order. We were super routine based. We were in perfect health. Everything we had in life was going for us. We weren't really looking for anything. We were just like, hey, sure, let's just pick up triathlon and take this whole new endeavor. We were looking for something, or we needed something. And through our journey, whether it's been a year in the sport or whether it's been 10 years in the sport, once you allow yourself to creep back into the version and the pattern that you used to be, that you used to find yourself day in and day out of, I don't really need to do it today because there's not my races are just getting canceled. I don't have anything to do, or we're not going to race this year anyway. What you're starting to do is you're starting to creep back and step back into the version of yourself you tried to distance yourself from when you came into this sport. Now, is that going to be true for everyone? No. There are plenty of people who gravitate towards triathlon because they're just very, very high performers in everything and in life. They're always driven. They're always going to find a way to get things done. That's just how they are. But for a lot of us, when you accept that and you say to yourself, but who knows, and I just need to get back to some of these things, or I can just put this off. I don't need to do this. You're robbing yourself opportunities to get better, because right now you're not in a holding pattern. You should still be getting better. You should still be part of a process. You should still be moving forward. You should still be trying to increase fitness. Is it going to look different than it might if you had a race in 6 weeks? Yes. But the march forward should still be going on. The way you are looking at training should still be there. Most athletes, they don't get burnt out because of the physical nature of so much of the training when they're doing something like a 70.3 in Ironman. If they do a short build, some of them do a long build and they get totally, but they emotionally and mentally get totally worn out. So you're not going to want to be putting in a crap ton of hours right now with something very, very far away. So it's going to look different via duration, volume, intensity, and the distribution of those. But what you should be still doing is understanding that as long as you have a week in front of you, the opportunity and the purpose of the week is to get better, not to keep taking passes, not to keep making excuses, not to. And listen, I get it. It's super frustrating to have races canceled, and it crushes your mojo, but for like a minute. But dude, get it together. There are still so many opportunities to get better. We all had races canceled, I'm sure. I had a race canceled in March. I had a race canceled that's already been canceled for June, and I'm doing the Leadville 100 in August. And while I'm optimistic it's going to happen, I I woke or a Saturday morning or whatever, I saw a Facebook post that they had canceled their June marathon, which is like obviously 2 months out of when I should be. So that was but so for a minute I was like, oh man, it's canceled. That one's canceled. Obviously it wasn't my race, but maybe it doesn't look good, or maybe I kind of had for a minute. And again, this is where we talk about like us being flawed and totally normal people. Is that like my first thought was, well, you know I'll just take my foot off the gas. There's a pretty good chance it's not going to happen. I was finishing off like the biggest run. I was this last weekend was just finishing off the biggest run week of my life. I had one more run to do to make it my biggest run week that I've ever done in my life. And literally my first, and I think this is human nature. I don't think it says anything bad or negative about us as a competitive athlete or as a person or as a human. I just think it's normal because I think as humans, we've evolved to like always look for the path of least resistance, or what's going to take us the shorter way around. Like let's cut through the mountain. Let's not go around it. And that was my first thought. you know, Boy, I could probably rationalize my way to a day off tomorrow just because I'm like, I just wasn't feeling it. I was down in the dumps about a race I'm not even doing getting canceled, but it's in the same series, it's the same location, it's not looking good. I could rationalize that and probably be okay with it. And then
Mm.
about a minute or two later, I was like, what the hell are you doing? No. Like, it's not, yes, do you have races as benchmarks and as set experiences that are important to you? Absolutely. But what I'm trying to achieve right now specifically on the journey to that is that if I let that dictate what I'm doing in the present, then I'm ruining and missing an opportunity to be a better version of myself past that. Because we always look at races as expiration dates, and nothing happens outside of that. But let's say Leadville doesn't happen. What I want to do is do a race later this year. So you know what I want to do? Be in the best shape that I can be for that and be the best, fittest version of myself that I can be. So you know what I don't need to do? Take a day off and be lazy. Just because. But that's also, I think that split second thought that we have is just like, I think we all have like the angel and devil on our shoulders when it comes to training. It's like, but you wake up like, you can just wait till later. You got all the time in the world, baby. Like, just, don't have anywhere to go. We got to stick in the house. Let's just work out later today. And then life happens and it gets hotter and you're like, yeah, I'll probably just bump this run and I'll just kind of move it in Training Peaks and we'll take today off and let's just do two tomorrow. And then you wake up tomorrow and your whole day is shot and you're like, crap, now I'm way behind. It's just
Mm.
like every time it's a snowball effect that happens. And I think we all can kind of go through it, but if you can wrap your brain around and kind of shift your mindset to it's just it's about getting better. And while the races are fun and they give us something to put on the calendar and they give you something to have as a background on your phone and it gives us something to have as a countdown clock in your Garmin, like they're just days. They're just singular days that shouldn't affect in a negative way the 360 something days before it. They're all opportunities to get better because at some point you're gonna line up. At some point you're going to hit the starting line. At sometimes you're going to put on your run shoes. On some day in the near future, you're going to put on your goggles, hop in the water, and you're going to think, "Am I ready? Did I skip too many workouts thinking that this wasn't going to happen, or did I just continue my pursuit of trying to be a better athlete?" And if you can say, I've continued my pursuit of trying to be a better athlete, then you'll race confident and you'll race free and you'll race very sure of yourself. But a lot of athletes will look back and think, God, I really didn't think this was going to happen. I really didn't plan on this. And even if it isn't this year, you don't want to be taking steps backwards ever. You always want to be taking steps forward. Just don't
Whew.
stand at the door. Like just don't stand in the door. Standing in the doorway, you're not coming from anywhere, you're not going anywhere. Like you always want to be going through. Like just make that decision. And even if it's very, very small, so many athletes, it's all about building patterns, building habits and behaviors. Like that's one of my main focuses as a coach is to get athletes to wrap their brain around being super consistent, making training part of their life, an acceptable and healthy part of their lives, not an obsession, but a healthy part of their life where they are asked and encouraged to do something every day. Because a lot of athletes, or a good portion that I start working with, either for a variety of reasons, will come to us and ask to get coaching because they struggle with being consistent. You can't make them be consistent, but you can set them up for success, allowing them very easy ways to change their pattern, to change their behavior and their habits and their focus, and to gain confidence. And it's usually from just removing a tremendous amount of volume that sets you up for failure and then putting in like, hey, just do 30 minutes, 40 minutes of something every single day. And then you can bump it up to 50 and then bump it to 55, then bump it to 60. Next thing you know, a few months later, you look back and you're like, oh my God, it's weird to like have a day off. Like it's weird. I don't want to have a day off. I want to keep going because now it's part of who I am. And that's what leads you to be really, really successful. But if you find yourself gravitating back towards, eh, 3 or 4 days a week is fine, or 1 or 2 days a week is fine, and that's fine. That's going to become your habit. That's going to become the behavior you're most likely to gravitate towards when things get difficult or when obstacles get in your way. It's not going to be push through, stay consistent, stay the course. It's going to be, I'm just gonna fall back and continue to take a couple of days off.
Before this podcast, I was kind of trying to come up with a few ideas, and one of the thoughts that crossed my mind was calling it the 20-minute run. And because that, to me, always seems like that one, we always talk about that weird little thing that people kind of don't give it a lot of credit, and it's like, oh, do I have to go up and run for 20 minutes or whatever? And but you and I both know that it's more than that. It's like almost one of the most important things, because it becomes that consistency builder or whatever. It's that accessible thing that kind of keeps your pattern going the right way when it should. Man, when you're talking about that stuff, like that devil and angel thing, how everybody gets, we all face that almost, I'm not saying every time, but a lot of times it's right there. And I've talked about it many times before. I call those sort of those life transitions, those mini transitions in life where you got to shift gears, from laying in bed or whatever to get up and go out and do your workout or do whatever it takes. And for me personally, that's always been a massive struggle. I mean, I remember back to the days when, when I was a kid, waking up, I don't care if I slept for 10 hours or 4 hours. It was kind of like waking up going, oh man, I'm dry. I don't feel like, you kind of that morning thing. And I guess I've just been cursed with it. I know there's a lot of people that are morning people that pop right up and they want to do their thing, but it's sort of like amazing how if you can kind of sit with that for a second, like you're saying, you just sit there and you kind of like, should I not? And then you just kind of just let it like talk itself out and then just go do something, take that step out of the doorway like you're talking about, or put on the running shoes or whatever the case may be, and do something that isn't going to like overwhelm you in that time. Because when you're talking about that, like, how easy that would have been to give up a big run. And I always, like, for me, that it seems like a subconscious, weird, twisted way to sort of build in an excuse later on in the process, Sort of like, well, I would have raced better, but, this pandemic, and then I got I could, and then the next thing you know, you've got kind of a race excuse, which is kind of bogus. And so I just think to me, that's just one of the more fascinating things about it, because it's like, oh man, how do we turn that I got to do this workout into I want to do this workout more often? And that really does seem like the secret. And I know that that's how you think about designing training plans. And it always, or it never ceases to amaze me, like when you would do that, like when you're actively my coach for many, many years, and I would be get up or whatever. I look at my next day and it would always just sort of hit the spot. You know what I mean? Like I would be really feeling like a groove, and you'd give me like a nice hour and a half run that seemed like exactly what I needed. Or if I didn't feel like doing something, you'd give me like a whatever, go to 2000 easy in the pool or something like that. It just, those are the nuances of this whole thing with triathlon that I think people just, it's very difficult to grasp, for one. And two, I just think it's the key to everything, is understanding where you're at and being able to drop in to the next day in a way that's going to make you look forward to the next day. So,
Well, and I think one of the most difficult things, and this goes along with life as well, is that like the angel and devil on our shoulders, so many times they can sound like the opposite. Like you don't really know who's talking to you, and like the devil can rationalize, like the devil of your training can rationalize stuff. Oh well, you really are too tired today, and you've been really consistent the last couple of weeks. It's probably just fine to take a day off. And you're like, well, wait a minute, that's probably true. Maybe I could. Who's talking to me right now?
mm,
But I found this as a coach over the many years that I've been doing this, is that when, and I find it really fascinating, athletes have the hardest time being consistent. The athletes that are already super consistent, they're consistent all the time. They find it the hardest to stay in their routine during a recovery week or after a day off, because it is like we have had the foot on the accelerator We had been cruising down the highway of training. We were headed towards our big race. And next thing you know, we just take our foot. We don't hit the brake. We just take our foot totally off the gas. And now to regain and get back up to speed, we have to be very, very purposeful about putting our foot back on the accelerator and getting up to speed. Many of them also struggle with the day after if I give off like a very, very rare, I'll give them a day off. The next day they're like, I just had a real hard time getting going today. Because what you do, and I think, and this is, and I'll be totally honest, it's a legit fear that I have as a coach with specific athletes that is like, man, would a day off for them be nice? Yes. But I know this athlete's specific tendencies, and one day off could turn into 5. And then we're right back where we started, trying to create a different pattern, and detraining has set in, and we need to basically start back from scratch. And so I might prescribe something just like super super easy, as like what might seem insignificant to them is like a 25-minute run or like a 45-minute easy spin. It's not a day off, but it kind of is. But the action that they're doing continues to solidify the behavior and the habit that they're creating. And if you're still in the process of, and this is very true for so many athletes, and during either through their whole triathlon career or through specific times of year, whether it's the meat of race season or in like the beginning of the year when they're more flexible, is that if you find yourself in the middle of creating a new habit and creating a new behavior, like being consistent and getting up, and I'm not talking about just with triathlon, with everything in life, with eating right, with getting as much sleep as you can, with reducing just anything in life you're trying to create better habits and behaviors overdoing, either removing something of your life or adding something to it. The first week or two you're in, you're like, you know what? What's a day off here? Because what's it more than like you haven't at that point. And there's a million people, oh well, 10,000 hours to perfection or 21 days to make a habit. It's like, I think we all know intrinsically, like, is this is this an okay time for me to like take the foot off the gas for a minute? Or if I do I risk like coming to a complete stop and having to start all over again? Yet I just gotta, you know, pump the accelerator for just a little bit and get going again, or just suck it up and keep going. And for a lot of athletes, that's so important and so vital. And I had like an athlete specifically the month of April, and she had just been had a ton of like, I mean, a million things going on in life, and was just having an incredibly hard time finding her way, being consistent. I think it had to do with just being everything that was going on in the world, work, home life, everything. It was just overwhelmed. And she reached out to me, she's like, I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do? And I said, I think we simplify it down to its simplest form. We can't swim right now. You're having a hard time wrapping your brain around getting on the bike. Let's just remove it all, do the easiest and most simplest thing, and do strength training and add in running. Not that cycling's not important, because we have races to do this year, but it's about setting people up for success. So what do? We removed everything, and I said, let's just run. She went 30 plus days without missing a single session. And now we're starting to slowly drip in bikes here and there. You don't want to just pile in 3 or 4 in a week and be like, all right, here we go, baby. We're ready to rock.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
You have to drip it in. But every athlete, and I think the triathletes specifically are so obsessed with this notion of imperfection or obsession with perfection, that we fail to see different ways of being not just creative, but different avenues we can find for ourselves that will allow us to get back to having a habit, having a behavior that inside of us says you need to go do something because it's good for you, and just that you want to. You can call it fake it till you make it. You can call it whatever you want to, but it's so important to have those behaviors and those habits to be successful, because it keeps you in the zone. It keeps you in the mindset. And right now, that is what everyone should still be in. It shouldn't be any different. You shouldn't be taking 5 days off a week. You shouldn't be taking 2 days off a week. You should be continuing on the path. You should be continuing to be part of that training process, and you should continue to be as consistent as you possibly can. Not because a race may or may not happen, but because you want to get better and because you want to continue to concrete a behavior and a habit that is positive in your life. Not one that, because every skip you make, every day off you have, and every excuse you seem to come up with is going to degrade and is going to start chipping away at that behavior you worked so hard to build. And I can tell you this from experience, and I think most athletes will. It's the same, I think, with weight loss and weight gain, and all these difficult scenarios that we all go through in life. Is that, boy, it it took me it took me a while to get super consistent and to kind of get that behavior in, and I'm sticking with it. But boy, is it easy to get off. Like, like those are so easy. Like, it takes the hardest things in life take time. But boy, if I take 4 or 5 days off for a week, it's like I'm back to square one, and I've got to work just as hard to get back and do the things we need to do. It's like it's not the same thing by any stretch, but I always kind of use that to myself, that this analogy someone gave me when I was first getting sober was that every time you go into a meeting, your disease is outside in the parking lot doing push-ups.
Mm.
It's not gone. You're just not a part of it right now. But the next time but if you do, because relapse is, unfortunately, it's a part of almost every alcoholic or person that suffers from a disease of addiction. It's part of their story, and you just don't come back to the same level of addiction and disease that you had when you got sober, or when you got clean. It's going to be significantly worse, which is why so many people, when they relapse, they have very, very bad experiences. They OD and they pass away. It's because things have gotten and progressively gotten worse. You're just not doing the things that you used to be doing, and that's a lot of it. Obviously not as severe, but it's that part of us that continues on a way that shows habits and shows behaviors and does the right thing. But when we take a week off or a day off, or a couple days off, man, is it so hard to get back on the train. It's like you have to rewire your brain and your commitment level to kind of get back. And I think we even tell ourselves
Yeah,
that.
because there's guilt there too, right?
Exactly right, and which is the worst, right? Like, that we have guilt over any of this.
Yeah, because when you put it that way, like I love the analogies to recovery and things like that, because obviously it was a huge part of my life with my father and what he went through, and so I've been aware of this kind of thing for a long time. But there definitely is that, if you are in a groove, and then it's almost like you see your lazy sides over. It's weird because, like, if you put it in that context, it's almost like your lazy or unfocused side is out in the parking lot doing push-ups. Because if you give it a in, it's going to kind of take over, and then does become harder to get back in the groove and whatever it is, and that's why it's so, like, I'm not perfectionist. I'm not great at it, but like I am really good at forcing myself to sort of stay consistent. Like you know, like I may not be on a clean plan or anything like that, but I push myself out there. I've always been pretty good at being like, all right, dude, I know this is the last thing you want to do right now, but it's the first thing you need to do, and just go do something, because the farther you fall off, and you're right, it's like the longer you stay on that couch. I see it with my buddies all the time, and it freaks me. Like, and that really was at the core of my turnaround back in the day, right when we met, or right before we met. I was at a point where I was like, the longer I stay out of, because I grew up an athlete and I had gotten super out of it and lazy and into the party room, and it was just, I knew I was at a point where if I didn't turn it around, it was going to get, the difficulty was going to multiply, like, daily, exponentially. And so it's in a way, it's like that on a microcosm too, because none of us obviously are getting younger, but the more we find, and you see it all the time, I'm sure, and I see it all the time, is like people do the Ironman or something like that, and then 4 months later, every day is red. It's sort of like, and that cycle gets harder and harder and harder. So that's why what you're saying is just that consistency to get back in, because the longer you stay out, the harder it's going to get normally. And then the more times you do it, I just can't imagine, like if it is a recovery analogy, like you say, that shit can, it's not the same every time. It's worse because like that lazy side or that unfocused side keeps building strength on the backside and under the surface. And every time you come back in and every time you start and stop, I think it might get trickier. Is that even fair to say, you think, or am
Yeah,
I
well, I
just?
mean, it's everything in life is that's important to you, or that's huge, is oftentimes a massive thing defined by small, almost minor and insignificant details. And one of the things that the my first sponsor told me was that most people don't relapse on the best day of their life or the worst day of their life. They relapse on a Tuesday afternoon for no other reason but just because. And because in the greatest days of our lives, when things are, when our fitness is great and when life is kicking and we just got a promotion, baby, yeah, I want to go out and run. I'm living free. This is my life. I am in control. I am the owner of my own destination. This is me, and this is the awesome version of myself. The same could be said for the worst day. You're like, I just need to run. Like, I need something that is for me. I need to create a positive experience, and I need to show the world that I can do this, or I just need this run as a therapy. But it's the other, like, kind of days where you kind of wake up on a Wednesday and you're like, just like kind of doing the own thing. And, what is it? What's a day? Like, what's this small 30-minute run? I just don't feel like it. And as you let those behaviors creep in, the next day, you're the last thing you were consistent in was choosing to not, and choosing to be inconsistent. And so it is going to be harder the next day. Now, don't get me wrong. Are there days that are specific to you that you need to say, hey, I need today off, and I encourage that with my athletes so much that if they feel like they totally need one, either A, text me, or hopefully I can see it beforehand, then they just take it. And obviously, I encourage that you should take days off like that. But it's that behavior piece. It's like, do you really need it, or do you want it, or is there like a happy middle ground? And that's the same way about the details and stuff with recovery. It's like, yeah, you go to meetings, but like going to a meeting is like a very, in my opinion, like a very small portion of what recovery is about. It's about other things in your life, how you're living, how you're communicating. Are you living authentically? Like, are you working the steps? Are you like there's a saying in recovery. It's like you can either be in recovery, which is totally different than being sober. Being sober is just the act of not drinking. Being in recovery means you're participating in the steps, you're participating in the process that is recovery, and you're rebuilding your life in a positive way, and you're recreating habits and behaviors that make you hopefully the best version of yourself. Or if you're just a person that doesn't drink, a lot of people would, like, what they'll call you in AA is you're just a dry drunk. You dry meaning you're sober, but you still have the same mentality. You still have participate in the same behaviors that you basically did while you weren't drinking, which are two totally different things. But it's all about the small, minor details, and that's what the same thing with triathlon and with training is, and anything in life. It's like when you find yourself neglecting or letting the small things pass, then the larger thing that's going to come is going to be really easy to just keep walking through. Like, I don't need to, and this happens with basically every athlete who does any kind of like strengthening and PT exercise. I had this conversation yesterday. It was like with an athlete, it's like, my IT band's flaring up. I guess I should start back doing my PT exercises again. I'm like, yeah, it's funny how when we do these PT and strength training exercises, we don't have these yet. Then we give them up because we feel good, and then what comes back? Oh, look, it's like we always do that. Like, oh, well, you should continue to do things that allow you to perform better and be healthier and not have these pains and niggles. Yet when we get things back, we forget and don't fully understand and apply all the reasoning that and the actions that led us to being this way. At the same time, I think we also you could flip that and say we don't do a very good job, or some of us don't do a very good job of looking back and thinking, oh, well, these were the signs of the things that I wasn't doing that got me to a very unhealthy place where I was injured. we just have a very hard time kind of mix and matching those and putting those things together to kind of come up with an answer that is unique to us as an individual and as a human, as a triathlete. That's like, oh, let's see, when I was super consistent, I was doing this, I was doing this, I was doing this. Like we always look back and we can find different little kind of triathlon training supporters or friends, if you will, that aren't actual people. They're just little other behaviors in our life that seem to always coincide with our best training or our worst training. Oh, well, man, like when I was training well, like I was also prioritizing sleep. What else was I doing? Oh, I was also eating pretty good. Okay. What else? Oh, I was also, I felt pretty high energy. I actually felt pretty good. I was, had a lot of patience at home. All right, cool. Uh, when I wasn't doing well, what was I? Oh, well, I actually was eating like crap. Okay, so that's probably a piece of that puzzle that I should be aware of. Yeah, you weren't sleeping your stamp too late. All right, that's a piece of the puzzle that I should. Okay, but we can do that with everything, right? It's like we can look at all. It's not just you can't look at every your best training grooves or your worst training grooves in a vacuum. That's just triathlon related because everything in our life, your total the total kind of universe of an athlete is like there's so many other things that are happening. We have to look and see what things are partnering with the best experiences we're having and the worst, and then see what we can remove on our own with our own control, or understand that things are going to be different for a period of time. So we need to figure out a different way to be consistent with some of these still occurring. If we can't change them for whatever reason, like maybe you're working 30 more hours a week, or your job totally changed, or you're traveling more, you're in a relationship, whatever. You don't want to get rid of those. You can't change them. So something else has to give and something else has to change. You have to rework and figure out a new routine and a new puzzle. But it's important to always go back and look at those similarities in the best part and the slowest part, or the worst part.
Well, yeah, that's why for me, I feel like it always comes back to managing energy and appreciating energy because, like you're saying, it's like if somebody's doing, like, I know when I'm going in my best, I am doing those little things, those little strength things, those little run warm ups, all these things. And not only am I doing them, I enjoy them. Like, I think of them as a part of the positive puzzle rather than a chore. And it's a weird little dynamic, right? And you know how I operate. It's usually 3 months out. I kind of start kicking into gear. It's sort of like, dude, your back's to the wall. Figure it out. And then, so we go and we get focused. And, I feel pretty strong for like 3 months leading up to a full Ironman. And then historically, I've kind of like let that fall off the table. But last year I did really good, where I came, because to me, it's like, you go do a race like that you've been training for, and it becomes that day, and you really shell yourself, right? I mean, I think that's a fair statement. Is that you do a full Ironman or even a half sometimes, depending on your fitness, you can be shelled. So it's sort of easy to go, well, I deserve a break, like 2 months. It's sort of like
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of this yo-yo thing instead of kind of going to it's an extreme, really. And that's sort of how I've kind of really, how it is. It's just you
But
I
see, but that's a perfect example of the behavior and habit you've created.
Yeah.
It's more an annual thing versus a daily thing, but that has become, because you did it the very first year you got into the sport, that has now become the one that you always do. And so you don't know what anything else necessarily will look like. You just, and we all fall into these because there's also, I think, a part of that that is comfort, but that also makes it easy to rationalize when we know we've done it one way and been fairly successful. Then it's that old adage of like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that could
Hmm.
also be said for a lot of things in life. Well, it's like, well, could it be improved? Yeah. Or do you know it could be improved? Not sure. Well, maybe you should try. So but it's we all do that too. Is like we always have these, we all have these realities that we shape about ourselves that are like, oh, hey, you know that's just kind of who I am. I can't run a lot. I just, my body won't handle it. You're like, well, let's look back and think like, what is that true or is that not true? And then those athletes continue to live on that I can't run methodology or comfort or habit or behavior. So they kind of, that reality comes to fruition. They kind of create their own destiny by telling themselves that they can. Same goes back to your yearly kind of like hiatus. So I've just kind of always done it. That's what I do. You've created that habit out of your very first year, and now it's stuck with you 7 years down the road.
Mm. Yeah, it's true. And to use the analogy of studying for an exam, I think this is because I used to be that guy that would cram too, right? And just uh, put it all in the end and just kind of turn it up for the last week of the semester or whatever and try and learn everything. And it seemed hard. And if you train like that and if you race like that, you like I feel like it was hard, but over the course of my training, there have been times when I have trained consistently and led into a race, and for lack of a better word, it didn't seem hard. It seemed relatively easy. And if we ingrain this idea in our head that races always have to be super hard, and then you're going to be shelled for weeks afterwards and all this kind of thing, if that's your mindset, that's your belief system, then you almost feel guilty in a weird way when something feels easier. Like, man, did I not work hard enough? Oh, yeah, you did. You just you studied every day leading for the whole semester versus the last week, and it didn't feel hard because you could recall things that you learned, and your body was and mind were in the right place for it, and you went through it, and it wasn't nearly as bad, and you did better or just as well. It's just two different mindsets. So I think you're absolutely right. Like it's a thing where I look at Ironman, and it has to be the hardest thing in the world, or it really wasn't a success. You know.
It's interesting how we kind of create these narratives with really no base, and then we, live them, whether it's triathlon or whether it's anything else in life, and then we have that like confirmation bias, feeling of, see, I told you so. It's like, but there's so many things that don't have to be as difficult as we tell ourselves, or as impossible as we tell ourselves, or that are often as well, like that are as easy as we think. Because we make them easy by doing it a certain way or not doing it a certain way. It's just, there's so many small, oftentimes really apparent behaviors in our lives, and patterns that we create that we obviously don't necessarily not understand, but we don't notice because it's become part of who we are and how we live. But it's recognizing those, and that's one of the great positives about being married, is that when you have those that don't necessarily line up or do what you should be, you have someone that loves you oh so much to bring that to your attention. It's like, hey, you know what, you need to get your shit together. But we have all those and that's with triathlon too. And it's like you don't know until you do it differently, or you don't know it, and what's going wrong or even what's going right, until you look back and kind of, oh well, I guess that does make sense. Because a lot of times, and this is I think a lot of triathletes are guilty of this, is that they just go on autopilot and just do it to do it. They don't really understand why. They don't understand the methodology behind it. They don't understand if it's even good. They just do it. And then they just keep moving. They move forward. And while I'm all for being the president moving forward, it's also purposeful, and it can be positive to look back and see like, hey, was this really good or was this bad, or what do I need to change, or what led to this outcome in this specific event or a specific race or the training day, whatever it is. Like, it's just really important, I think, to understand where we are and how we can best support ourselves with those really important behaviors and habits that are so crucial to being successful. And that's with consistency, and it's with being healthy, and it's with all the minor things. It's just understand. And a lot of it too is like understanding what your strengths are. What are you really really good at? And then hopefully using that knowledge to propel yourself to overcome or mitigate any of your weaknesses. Not that you don't need to address them or try to improve them, but you don't want to you don't want to send somebody out who's best suited to do one thing and say, "Oh, well, we need to really improve, so we're just going to remove that strength and now you need to figure out how to get better." Like, that's how you should do it. No, you should equip them with their strength to help them combat their weaknesses. And I think we can all do that as individuals, as humans, as athletes. Is all right. Well, I don't need to remove and limit myself to the things that I'm already good at, because those are good and those will propel me to being successful. But there are other ways that I can be more successful, and those are by improving my weaknesses, or the things that I'm often making mistakes with, or the workouts that I know I'm missing. It's like I need to figure that out. And the athletes that are the most successful and perform the best within themselves, they do that. They recognize, I just, coach, maybe I had an athlete last night text me, coach, the last few weeks, it looks like I'm having like double work meetings. It's like almost impossible to get anything done over an hour. Okay, simple. Let's make it an optional day or 30 minutes or less at super chill. Like, athletes that understand and can look back and think, all right, this day wasn't, it doesn't have to be a total loss, but in order to be successful, I can do this. And I think oftentimes we either choose one or the other. We choose a can't or a can. But most times it's the combination of the two. It's like, well, I can do a lot of this, but I can't do this. Or I can't do this, but what I can do is this. And there's a happy medium between it all, and that's goes with so much of training. It's not so much I can't as a definitive, you know, um, blanket statement. It's usually, well, I haven't been able to, up to this point, do this. Like, I hate it when athletes say, I just can't do this. That's not true. You just haven't shown yourself yet that you can. And that might be because the roadmap has been wrong, the training has been wrong, the way you approach it has been wrong. Your mentality, more than likely, anytime you say, I can't, it's usually going to fulfill that prophecy of not being able to. You just cannot. Or and then taking that and think, all right, well, let's find out the ways that we can, and then shift that to the other end. Like, there's always a way. And but it takes, going back to something I said earlier in the podcast, is like, it takes a lot of thought, and it takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of, like, looking harshly at yourself in a critical way, but yet positive, constructive way, that's saying, like, all right, well, instead of saying that I can't, and there are, let's be honest, like, there are legit things that we just cannot do, or we don't and can't make the time for. But in a lot of ways, it's like, well, if I look in the mirror and think, all right, well, I need to get rid of this, do need to do this, I probably need to pay more attention to this, then I will, and then I can. And those are things that we should always be striving to do, that we should always be striving to improve on, no matter what time of year it is, no matter what race is coming up. We should always strive for that.
Hmm. Yeah, man, it's definitely not a one size fits all thing out there, and that's why I wonder if a lot of people just struggle because they'll pick up a some kind of training plan or whatever and just try and apply it to them when it was designed for somebody else in a totally
Mm.
different space and whatnot. And you do a really good job of that, paying attention and being customized and, making it for the individual athlete based. I mean, you've told several stories just today that have applied directly to that, that, hey, let's find a way with you and the way what's going on in your life. So I think stuff like that, and like I was talking about, just the way you can place workouts that hit the right spot at the right time. I think those are just, they seem like little things, but they're just massive in this sport because it could derail somebody in a heartbeat. That one day could turn into 5 days, kind of thing.
It's I guess we'll end it on this one, but it's very simple to break it down. It's like telling somebody, "Hey, do you want to go here? Well, I don't know how to get there." Okay, well, I guess I'm not going to go. Or, "Hey, do you want to go here?" Well, I don't want to go here. Well, here's a roadmap. Here are directions. Oh, I guess I can go there. Like,
Yeah.
there's always a way, and you just have to find a way to set yourself up for success, or have someone else set you up for success, and remove those can'ts, and set, and like, that is the number one thing for 10 plus years that I've coached. The number one thing that athletes say that they're the happiest with training, or that they're the most surprised about after the first few months is the amount of stress that has been removed from their life, because they no longer have to second guess themselves. They no longer have to worry about that guilt and shame. They no longer have to worry about creating their own training plan, or if it's going to be right, or if they're doing it the correct way, or if they're going long enough, or if they're going short enough, or they're going hard enough, they're going easy enough. It's just there, and they just do it. And that is life. Life is all about minimizing stress. And the best you can do that, then you're going to be in great shape. And that's what we should all be striving to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree, man.
Minimize our stress, man.
Oh, all right. So I guess we.
Guess
What
that's
else is
it.
going on? That's it.
Yeah,
That's
man.
it.
That's it. That's it.
Check out the C26 Hub. We've had a lot of people coming in there lately. It's been really cool. It's our little membership area at C26Triathlon.com. Go to the online hub tab. You have a little drop down that'll show you a preview. There's tons of videos, bonus podcasts, everything like that. We have a pay what you want through the end of September. Right now it's $9, $29, or $49. It all supports the podcast, and each tier goes all the way through September. So just pay what you want and check that out. And we're going to keep getting that better. We got some really cool stuff that we're brewing up right now. And there's also, if you go to C26triathlon.com, either you as a beginner or friends that you might want to help navigate their way into the sport. We have a new beginner's guide, 10 pages of 10 chapters, I should say, of interactive information that is good for the beginner and or somebody that might want to rediscover why they got into the sport and look at some of the basics again and get a better handle on where you're at. So check that out. If you go to our website, it's right there on the front. There's a box that you can click and go right to the chapter navigation. It's pretty simple and cool. So that's all I got, bud.
That's all I got too, man. Yeah, C26Triathlon.com has all the things you need for our community camps and coaching. Stop by if you have any questions. You can always reach out to Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. If you have any questions for me, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man.
All
Nice
right, dude.
20-minute run today.
Hey, success and success, man.
All right, thanks, man.